Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
Is your team ready to defend against the latest cyber threats? Validate human cyber defense readiness with Rangeforce. Sharpen your team's capabilities with a cloud-based platform that takes a real-world, continuous approach to cybersecurity skills development. Rangeforce empowers cyber defense readiness at scale. With hundreds of interactive modules, learning paths mapped to industry frameworks, skill assessments, and team-based defensive threat exercises. Visit securityweekly.com/Rangeforce to learn more. Customers want fast and frictionless digital experiences, yet also expect protection against breaches, privacy violations, and fraud. Drive engagement by optimizing security and convenience to attract and retain customers. Use the PingOne cloud platform to build, test, and optimize digital experiences. The no-code orchestration engine weaves together authentication, user management, and MFA, all of which can enhance security, drive engagement, and boost revenues. Visit securityweekly.com/ping identity to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. All right, our second interview for today is sponsored by Tanium, and today's topic is improving incident response preparation and effectiveness. Paul Kelly, Global Director of Technical Solution Engineering, joins us today. Hello, Paul. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this one as a ex-chief incident handler for 5 years of my career. I think I had to juggle this one. Also, Tim Morris, Financial Services Strategist at Tanium, joins us as well. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Glad to be back, Adrian. Looking forward to it.
Providing some support for Paul this time.
Sure. Yeah, we've been in the war rooms together. It's been a few days and nights, so
many times. Yes.
So this is one of my favorite topics because I was also a pen tester and a PCI QSA. I wrote a lot of incident response plans. I trained a lot of incident responders, and I think it's just a hot mess when nobody's prepared to do incident response and it's thrust upon you. Whether that's very high level decisions like, are we going to pay the ransom or not? The kind that are at the highest level, that you're having between executives and general counsel, and then at the very low levels, like figuring out how to find things in your tools. It's on either side. If you haven't prepared, if you haven't practiced, it's a total mess, and I hate to see it. And I get really excited when I see these kinds of, there's all kinds of things you can do out there, that prepare you for this. I've seen blue team CTFs, that give you blue team type tools, and, they got different scenarios and stuff like that. And I think you guys might be involved with some of that kind of stuff. And I'm a big fan of that stuff. And anything that gives responders more experience.
Yeah, talking about both ends, I'll let Paul talk about the practitioner end, but we talk about the high end. That's something that has drastically changed in the last year. So if you think about, matter of fact, I just did an article, and that is asking those questions. Sadly, most organizations don't have solid incident response plans. The SEC hopes to change that. They're changing some rules so that it's required not only that you have them, but you have someone on your board who is technically savvy, that understands all the cybersecurity acronyms and what's going on. In case you didn't catch the news, I believe it was last November, the investors of SolarWinds sued their board for not having, cybersecurity monitoring and incident response plans the way they thought they should be. So yeah, it's a big deal. And for all the practitioners out there in the audience, yes, we do have, for most organizations, we have C-certs and we run them. But as you were talking about earlier, this is a team sport. And while it's great to do all these tabletop exercises, if you don't practice them, like with live fire in a range, like we would call it a cyber range, where you can actually test not just your plans and see where the weaknesses are, but the tools and what is where, as well as the personalities. How you're organized, who's the incident responder, who's the chief person that's going to, make sure doing that. And some incidents, they go on for hours and days. Even a couple I've been involved with weeks. And if you don't have a good plan on how you hand that over, not just hand it over to eradicate whatever the threat is, but how you're communicating, whether that's to your board, to your senior management, to your mid-level management, even out to what's the PR plan? What are we going to tell, the public? So all of this has to be practiced, just like any kind of sport. And I know keeping people's data safe, it shouldn't be a sport, but the analogies work here. We always use the blue team analogies that, the red team only has to get lucky once. I like to flip that in a positive manner. The red team only has to be burned once. You can have multiple shots on goal. But what team goes out there, let's just take American football, for example, and doesn't have their first, set of plays ready to go, doesn't have their goal line defense plays ready to go, their 2-minute drills ready to go. And we should have that, whatever it is, DDoS, ransomware. So with Tanium, what we do, having a unified endpoint, or what we call a converged endpoint management platform, is we've got all these capabilities inside of one tool so that you can move very, very quickly. And it's very important. Like I say, train like you fight, fight like you train. I think your index says you need to play like you practice. So Adrian, back to you or Paul to expand on that.
Yeah, I just want to expand a little bit on it, and that as a practitioner, things have changed a lot over the years. So Tim, you touched on this a little bit, in that now we have a converged endpoint management tool, and we have all of these capabilities now in a singular product. But prior to that, we actually had a bunch of different solutions that we had to use to do all these different capabilities. And I remember those days. This is before Cyber Threat Fusion Centers, before we had a mature SOC, before we even had incident response procedures. And you were using all these point solutions and pivoting, and you can never really connect the dots or put everything together cohesively. And I love the fact that, we have a product now that does all that, right?
Yeah, it does. When you're in the middle of attack, what I like to say is you're going to see something, and whether you create that as a notable in your SIM or SOAR, I call it chasing blinky lights. Something's going to happen. Like you're going to see something on your, say, outbound, on your egress, or something on your ingress point. And then what happens is you have to immediately pivot to go look and see what's this thing. Or one of your security tools did give you an alert. So you have to go verify, is that a false positive? Is that worth looking at? And the quickest way to do that, honestly, you can go, connect to that machine and look at that configuration, try to look at the process tree. The problem is usually you're looking at old data. Even if you have an EDR tool that's cloud-based, you're looking at data that might be out there 10 minutes ago. If you're fortunate and it logged everything you needed to, usually we end up having to tune some logs down. Tune it down so you don't get everything. But when you can look at the endpoint and see that data on that machine, all it was process genealogy and those kind of things, it really puts you ahead of the game with incident response. And then the next step in that parade is, if I see this thing, let's say a process, whether it's a mutex, an MD5 hash, or whatever, I can immediately pivot and look across my entire environment. The environment Paul and I supported together was over 500,000 endpoints. 400,000 of those, greater than 400,000 of those were Windows. We could look across all those and say, hey, does this MD5 or this mutex, is this process? If I see it on, say, 10,000 more machines, then okay, this is probably a false positive. There's something going on here. We still want to figure it out, what's going on. But if I only see it on 1, 2, 7 machines, then I got something else going on. And then we're back to what you were talking about earlier, that 110, 60 rule. Trying to, get the investigation done as quickly as possible. And again, if you're not, it's one thing to go through and comb logs and get these alerts, but if you don't set this up instead of just a tabletop, we would do prior to COVID, 2 in-person events a year. We would have everybody in the same room, and we would cross shifts to other geographies so that we could pick up on what was going on. And we would do multiple attacks. Some things were just simple reconnaissance. Some were very advanced persistent threats. I remember one test we did where everybody got really mad because we started the range with the red team having the golden ticket. And so there, it's not about, finding it and it's like, how do you respond? This is probably a worst case scenario, because what's the option? If we delete the account, they just create another one, or take over another one. So we got to burn the directory down. So it's important.
Yeah. So question for you guys. It's one of the things I think that is really tricky, even for folks who have been at an organization for a long time. I've found if you haven't spent time looking at your logs, looking at your network traffic, looking at stuff that happens in your organization, there's a lot of, false flags and just weird rabbit holes you can go down. Things that look really bad, things that look like breaches and incidents that are just normal stuff for your network. Maybe even on other networks they don't look like that. What would you guys suggest for folks to, what kind of activities, like, should this be done as a team or individually? How should people go about getting more familiar with their environment so that when an incident does occur, they kind of know the lay of the land a bit better?
Well, it's definitely a team activity, right? So you could tackle it solo, but I think you're going to be more effective actually if you actually participate as a team. And the log problem is just a lot of non-actionable data. It's a lot of noise, and nobody can be a subject matter expert on every type of log, but you can start looking for patterns. You can start building intelligence, or what we call signals, to be able to detect the anomalous activity, right? So that's typically what I would do with the team, is actually, let's start focusing on what bad looks like so we can actually go hunt for that. Let's not worry about trying to understand every little bit of log detail in here. Let's just try to understand the stuff that really matters to us.
Well, there's multiple tiers to that, because it is a team effort. And that's the reason you do these live CSERTs, because what you'll discover is, one, where your technical aptitudes are, because any single analyst, I don't care if they're, new or they're a veteran, they've been doing this, and a veteran of SOC might be 3 years, but even your advanced research people that have been there for several years, nobody's an expert at everything. When you do it as a team, you figure out, okay, this is a log, I haven't seen this before. You know who to call. I think the biggest lesson we always learned was who to call. It helped update our playbooks. What team is responsible for this or that? I may not know what this web application log actually looks like, because I don't have that expert in the SOC, but I know exactly who to contact to go figure out, hey, is this normal, or not normal? And then it goes back to the other piece. One of the things we always say is you need to know what you look like to an attacker. And what that requires is beyond pen testing, is threat assessments and adversarial consulting. Adversarial consulting that is going multiple different ways. And what you get out of that, Adrian, is more of that individual stuff you're talking about, because the red team's job is just not to say, hey, blue team, you messed up. It's definitely a purple team exercise where every time you do one of these consulting gigs, whether it's an op you did, what we would do is we would take some of the bigger ops or bigger attacks or breaches we would hear about in the news, and then we would prepare them and turn them on ourselves. So if it was a SolarWinds, if it was a Struts attack, if it was some APT, whatever, we would craft it and do it internally on ourselves. And yes, were we successful? Well, to me, the way I managed the team's success was, not only that you compromise this many machines or it could have been successful, but what did we learn as a team, including the blue team, on what this looked like in a log? Because sometimes we get through an ops and there were 20,000 alerts in a log that should have been caught, but it wasn't, because we didn't have the experience that you were talking about, Adrian. So that you have to do both. You've got to work at it. Each individual takes responsibility for what it is they're trying to learn to be better. But if you're not doing it as a team, you're missing the boat.
Well, I think the beautiful thing here. You okay, Katie?
Sorry, I just said I had a question.
Okay, go for it.
Yes, sorry if that sounded scary. No, I was just going to say, so I have a question, because you mentioned SOC burnout. You joked that, 3 years in the SOC is a long time, but it really is in the industry. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know this is somewhat tangential to the conversation, but how does this help with burnout? How does it help with longevity? How does it help with continuity from a talent point of view?
A perfect question, and it is an issue, and couldn't come more timely. Our Chris Hallenbach, our CISO at Tanium, he just did an article talking about cybersecurity shortage. And one of the things in there, there's a lot of things to address that. His specifically is sometimes our HR departments have too rigid of, hey, we want you to have all of this years of experience. And because of burnout, we need to keep it coming. What I will say is when you do these as a team sport, while they are competitive, they can't be to the point where people feel a risk of their jobs or that kind of stuff. They can be very fun, even though they're tiring. I mean, you're doing this for 24 hours straight. What it does is it develops camaraderie among the teams. So it does help the burnout. And then it's up to leadership in the organization. This is something that I worked on really hard, is to make sure that we had career progression, because we do want to rotate it. We do want fresh faces in there. I would take some of my senior people and say, hey, you got to spend I want you to spend a week and do it as training. Fortunately, most of my staff were they just love mentoring. They love training, new people, new stuff. So the way you combat that is the burnout is, one, keep it interesting. We had to overhaul the SOC completely many years ago. I wasn't responsible for that. But what happened is the SOC had turned into case managers, and their metrics was how quickly they could close a case. Well, that doesn't solve security problems. You can close a case by saying, okay, AV alert done. No, we had to put people in with passion. So it's a bit of an HR issue on how you recruit and retain. It's keeping that camaraderie, inside on these events and keeping, stuff moving. And then providing opportunities for learning and improvement. Honestly, I don't want people in my SOC that just doesn't like doing this stuff. It's like when somebody hears about the alert, there's people hear about the fire, there's people that run from it, and there's people who run in the building. I want the people that run in the building because they're the ones who have a passion for this and want to do that. And you need to use that momentum to fight the burnout and the fatigue.
Yeah. So one of the things well, first, Katie, did you have a follow-up on that?
No, and I don't want to sound like I'm falling over and dying. So you go right ahead. Thank you, Adrian.
I'm sorry. It was just a bunch of different sounds at the same time, and I couldn't parse it out in my brain. My brain is. Yeah. So one of the things I like about this is it seems like when you do this stuff, it reveals weaknesses. So you go through one of these live fire exercises and you can't find information on an asset because your asset management sucks, and maybe 10, 20, 30% of your assets, you don't have good attribution. You don't know who the owner is. You don't even know what the asset is or does, but you keep seeing that IP address show up in different logs or alerts and things like that. Or, what was the other example I had? Yeah, asset management and
asset management missing logs.
Maybe visibility.
Yes.
Just as you go through this, this popped up. I didn't know who to contact about that, or the purple teamer, red teamer comes to you and says, I disabled AV on this, or I created an account here and nobody saw it. All these gaps, become visible when you do this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, Tim, you had a saying here. I'm actually going to steal it. So you can't manage what you can't see, and you can't protect what you manage. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, close. You're close.
Close. No, okay, you can restate it.
Manage secure. You can't secure what you don't manage. You can't manage what you don't know. So it goes back to what Adrian said about visibility. And visibility could be the asset, the application, the logs. You don't see it. So those are huge weaknesses, like you said. Or we've got a tool configured wrong, or it shows you where your defense in depth has no depth. Meaning one tool. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to expand on that a little bit. So back to my comments earlier, just, it's, I think a lot's changed. I think, now we have better endpoint detection and response tools. We actually have capabilities now at our disposal, and we're not having to pivot and go use all these other solutions. And just bringing it back to, where we work now. And this was one of the tools that we used, Tanium. That was actually probably one of our principal tools for threat hunting. That was actually where a lot of our analysts would go, and they would actually identify all the other attributes that they needed to understand, the risk to the endpoint who was logged into it, what activity was happening at the time when the incident occurred, and just kind of helps you complete the story so you know exactly what happened when that incident occurred. And then you can still, again, then build a detection around that. So if it was something where it was behavioral, et cetera, you can look for that behavior.
Also, the live fire, we learned, I remember the very first one we did, we learned the most were about the people. When you mention weaknesses, you don't like to use the term weak with your staff or your people. What you learn are the opportunities. Like, this group didn't know this group exists. Matter of fact, what happened is every time we did a live fire, it would grow a little bigger, because like, oh, you know what? We need a DNS expert in the room. We need a web proxy expert in the room. It would just grow, and we would have, endpoint people. We have web app people. We have Active Directory people. Our Unix, admins. You just discover, what it is you need, to get that. And then back to the incident response. Prior to us having Tanium, again, working what I did, it was brought in not just threat hunting but incident response, because I remember in 2012 spending, and I just saw it, this malware Salady raise its ugly head a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Salady took us almost 8 to 10 weeks to clean up, and I was working every weekend in the spring of that year, and it was so frustrating. And the reason was because it was a nuisance virus. It wasn't like it was encrypting anything. What it was doing was turning off, the security tools, which, by the way, the fire is not the time to realize your fire trucks aren't working. That's another reason you want to do these live fires and getting them done. And just chasing it and figuring out, because what would happen is our end user and compute teams would re-image, go back to a gold image. But the problem is Salady would infect the profile. And then during the profile migration, when they would load it back down, they would load the virus back in. And it was just none of our tools. I mean, obviously it's spreading because one of our security tools failed, multiple security tools failed. And we didn't have a tool that would able to do real incident response. So I can check the anomalous behavior and see if that's real or not, if there's something I need to do, and move back and forth. Because when you have an attacker or malware like that in your environment, so I might have lost it. When you have an attacker in your environment, you have seconds, minutes, to get catch, not days.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I think we lost Paul. I thought I was the one that got cut off.
Yeah, I was wondering what happened there. Yeah. But yeah, it's and it's more than just making sure you have the data you need. A lot of it's making relationships. Different meeting people in different departments. Like, you don't want to just email somebody, hey, I need your data by the end of the day. Thanks. Bye.
No, it's all about those making. The biggest benefit of doing these live fires are the relationship building. You know who to call. You know who the experts are. And also you just learn what I call, the diverse skill sets. We have, a myriad of different skill sets. Some people are great at that detail work and digging into logs. Some people are really, really good at, at aggregating stuff. They can see, point A, B, and C and figure out, okay, what the shape of that is. Not everybody's wired the same way. Also, in this environment, like I was saying earlier, communication is key when you're doing these things, because you're always trying to keep everybody abreast, senior managers, the teams. You got to make hard calls, not whether or not, just like you got to pay the ransom or whatever. Sometimes that call is, we're going to turn a service down, and it's going to affect tens of thousands of people if we turn it down. And I've been in that in real life, and it's tough. But if you haven't practiced, if I call some business leader, some CIO, and say, hey, I'm taking your largest web property offline right now,
right.
That's not the first time they want to hear from me. They don't want to hear that ever, but they definitely don't want to hear it from me the very first time. Like, who's this guy? And who does he think he is that he can do that?
They want some confidence or assurance that you're not going to ask for that without understanding what you're asking, right? Like the gravity of what you're saying you need to do here.
You do that all the time. Like, for example, vulnerabilities come out of 0 days. It's a big deal, for some organizations, especially ours. If you call something a critical vulnerability, seems they always come on a Friday. If you call it critical, that means all your high valued assets have to be patched in 72 hours. And the clock starts ticking as soon as you say that. And so obviously you got to get the CISO approval, the CIO approval to get to that level, because people are going to work the weekend. It's a big deal. There's an imminent threat involved. And if you don't have those relationships to be able to make those calls confidently, and that they trust that you're making the right decision, that this truly is a real threat. It's not, just, I just am super paranoid and want it done. No, this is something real. So it's a big deal. Paul's back.
Hey,
yeah.
back.
So Paul, we were talking about how it's important for IR teams to have friends, and to build relationships with other departments, so that when they need to ask them for something, they need a favor, they need, as Tim was saying, take down like a major web property or something like that. They're not going to get the middle finger. They're going to get some assistance.
You still might get the middle finger, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, did you say I had lots of friends then?
Yeah.
I was definitely one of those people that was really, really good at building strong alliances with other groups, actually. So those relationships really do matter at the end of the day, and it makes your life so much easier. And especially when, like you said, you have to have the very tough conversations with them that, hey, your assets are being controlled by a Russian botnet. I kind of actually do have to take them offline now.
Yeah, and it's not just IR, Adrian. We talked about this in our last meeting, but when you develop relationship with other IT teams and apps team, like for example, Tanium, I ran Tanium as a service. Remember we were talking about, the farmer and chef and being the HelloFresh, where I'll just give you the data. Those build relationships, those break down silos. And so people trust you when, oh yeah, you're the owner of this security tool, but this security tool has access to so much data that I can make your life easier as an app owner, as a sysadmin, or as a business leader. And if I can give you that data and set that up, and that was one of Paul's specialties. Paul was key. He could go set up one of these feeds in 10 minutes, and get people the data they need. So that actually is a technical advantage, but also builds relationships in a real world. So when you get into the tough situations, the IRs, the 0 days, the attacks, they trust you because you're willing to help.
Yeah. And, all of those data feeds were also done because I didn't want to be in the business of having to prepare or curate the data in the way that they wanted it to be presented. So it was much better to just kind of put the onus on them. Hey, I can deliver you all the data attributes you want all day long on a scheduled frequency that you want, but the onus is on you then to deliver how you want to actually present this, where you want to integrate it. Didn't matter to me so much. It was more about, I just want to help you broker the data. That's all.
So any other suggestions on how to, we talked about how important it is to do training as a team, live fire exercise, not just tabletops, but, on building these relationships, sharing data that you have was one example. Any other examples of, Paul, it sounds like you made a bunch of friends. Like, do you do lunch and learns? Food is often a great way to make friends across different departments at work.
Drinks, cigars, food, you name it. So there was a lot of different tactics used in building friendships. Food goes a long way. Taking people to lunch goes a long way, because oftentimes these teams, they're not even really thought of that often. They're not given a lot of swag. They're not really taken care of, so that stuff does go a long way with them. I can't tell you how many times I went in with a t-shirt or a mug and they were like a friend for life. Or they would see me the next time, and that actually made a difference. It sounds silly, but it actually really does make a difference to some people when you do stuff like that. But yeah, that's just one small part of it. I think giving them your time is a huge part of it. Giving them your expertise and your knowledge, you're going to get unlimited things for that. And if they know that you are a subject matter expert, then you are going to be a go-to, right? That's someone that is going to continually follow up with you until they hopefully on their own become a subject matter expert in that particular area. That's just part of the evolution that we want.
All right. Anything that we're missing here? Are there any good blog posts or public resources that folks could use here? I know, Tim, you mentioned several blog posts. I assume those are all on the Tanium blog.
We have a couple of, Tanium has their own magazine, digital magazine called endpoint.tanium.com. Go out there and check. I just did an article last week or week before on 6 questions, every board should be asking. This is this is a high level stuff. But if you go out there, there's tons of articles on how, to do, correct asset inventory, past management. Also, Paul, our community page, our blog post for something specific, say, hey, I want to go figure out how to do IR for Print Nightmare or for Kaseya or Log4j. We have some very, very practical stuff there to do.
Struts, Log4j, and those are living articles. So those are getting updated in real time. So that the moment that we're dealing with those situations, that became a go-to for a lot of our customers. It became a go-to for us internally, so we could understand, what the latest was.
And I will say, companies, I hear hit or miss as far as what's invested in training. We're spending billions of dollars in cybersecurity, and a chunk of that has to be in training in the individuals. But I would challenge any leaders out there, not just that, yes, the training is important. Get people to the classes so you can get the subject matter experts, if that's, in forensics or malware analysis, whatever, get that kind of stuff, incident response handlers, get them the training they need. But train your teams as a group. That is an opportune time. One of the cool things about doing those 24 hours, we had it for 72. The fight was 24, but we would come in and do the pre-flight and we'd have everybody go to dinner, have drinks together. Those form lasting, because you can let your guard down. You can talk about, what's going on and get to know, their family, the kids, the dogs, that kind of stuff before you actually go into the room and have to fight. But you need to pay. You got to invest in that. And it's not just about the dinners. Whatever, we had a third party actually do the live fire fights for us. We could do our own stuff and we could do some range, but nothing was better than to have an outside objective opinion come in, run these attacks against us, give us benchmarks, give us our grades, tell us, hey, you didn't do this quite so well. You did this really, really well. So when I say invest in training, it's not just letting everybody go get the certs that they want to get. No, you need to invest as a team, as an organization needs to invest as a team to use the tools that they have to. And then a plug for Tanium. Our training is awesome. We have our own certification program. There's the culture out there, the culture here, and the culture for our customers. The support is just crazy. You can go out there in a community site, people help you at a drop of a hat. It doesn't matter your experience level. Or
even if you're using our products. It's just such a good place to go just to glean that info.
Yep, it's out there.
And before we wrap here, just to highlight what Katie was saying earlier, I know a lot of folks in the field, here locally, friends I have, people I know, people I've mentored. If you want to build a good team, if you want to have a stable staff, if you don't want so much turnover, if you don't want so much burnout, like a lot of people would almost prefer more, team exercises like this, team outings, this kind of training, than vacation even. It kind of is a vacation for them, from the cubicle, from whatever their day-to-day routines are. And that's the kind of thing I think people crave. A lot of people in security are very mission focused. Like they like doing security because they feel like they're making a difference or doing something good. And that's just accentuated when you get to do it as a team. When you can see results and see yourself get better as a team. So I love that the suggestion there. I think
as a vendor, we do that all the time. We have like our hands-on hunting course, and we give those to our customers. Again, we make them, beer and learn or whatever. We have them in a social aspect, so they're getting the training, but we can do that for a customer, specific customer, or a set of customers, and they get to trade, their stories, and it is always well worth the time. Again, I just challenge any managers and leaders, take advantage of that. I took advantage when I was managing vendors, being on the vendor side. We love those opportunities. We can get into a customer and train their folks, their analysts, on not just how to use a tool, but just to watch them grow together as a team.
Absolutely. That's a great place to wrap. Thank you so much, Paul and Tim, for joining us on Enterprise Security today. This was amazing.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Enjoyed it.
And make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Also, that was Endpoint. Endpoint magazine is endpoint.tanium.com. A lot of good resources there as well. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.